sounds like that when the drugs came from Medicare, we didn't know what tier to put them in. If we could sort of like segregate or categorize things like LLCs or acts or something,
right,
and get some kind of uniformity, we could better understand it and put the laws, to make it work.
and that's true. It would make it easier for everyone because I'll tell you, it's the lawyers who make the money. All the law firms have their own white papers on pay to play, and that's what happens. Vendors will come to them to ask for an opinion about who they can contribute to, how much, and make certain it won't preclude them from a fair and open contract process. And it covers not only the local government, municipalities, the counties, every commission, every authority, every board of education in the state, too, also. And so, because there are all of these different pay-to-play restrictions out there for those bodies that
It
have
should be categorized,
adopted.
and this way everybody can just look at it and there's no gray lines.
Right. It is true. And ELAC also, I just wanted to add, too, that any vendor or professional who contracts with the state must file annually. Mm-hmm. There's a special report that they can file, and you can go on ELAC and read that, too. And it lists all of their contributions as
like
a
company.
firm. Yes. And it's that openness and transparency that does help. As a state, I think it is important to note that there have been tremendous strides when it comes to ethics. I think we do have...
I wouldn't say about ethics.
Well, openness and transparency. But it is our goal, you have to agree, is ethics in government. Because our OPRA laws, our Open Public Meetings Act, we really have put a lot of time and attention into at least bringing that to the table.
Yeah, I have been working, I'll have to interrupt you there because I've been working for a year and a half, almost 2 years, on trying to bring the Open Public Records and Open Public Meetings Act into the 21st century. And the group that has been the biggest roadblock is the League of Municipalities.
And yes, I find that, I have to say, I know that part of their argument is that it puts too much pressure on certain municipal individuals or employees who hold the responsibility of satisfying the Open Public Records request. But the truth is, in this day and age, when until the internet is taxed, all of that information can be posted and emailed for free. It doesn't have to be copied anymore. It doesn't have to be sent in the mail to you.
And there's challenges with that though, because there are some information that for safety reasons needs to be redacted.
Oh, well,
and there's
that's
information. I mean,
true.
all of this requires a burden on employees, and we will discuss this. This isn't the focus of this meeting, but there are burdens that are very challenging for with limited dollars to be able to allocate resources and staff time to do. There is a pull and a push, and it's understandable why there's some resistance on that part when you speak to some of the city clerks who are dealing with this increased need for.
We need another whole meeting on that.
That's another topic. But if I just
But Loretta, nobody can take away from you the championing that you've done for that,
absolutely,
and the benefit that you've given to the taxpayers.
But David, I have found it really discouraging, this attitude that, first of all the complaints they have are under the current law.
Yes. No, you're right.
Which is what I keep on trying
days.
to explain. Put it online. Put your agendas online, your budgets online, your regular contracts online, all of that basic information, and then you don't ever have to be disturbed. And we even put money into the bill to create a state webpage so that any town doesn't even need its own webpage. They can just get a subcategory, whatever, under the state webpage. But the League of Municipalities, I am not happy. Let's move on.
And it is true that some municipalities need to even be brought up to speed for the existing laws. Senator, we're working in Hackensack, and when the new mayor and council began, their meetings were not even recorded on tape, audio tape. So things have changed there, but yes, that's what I'm saying when they, exactly. And our very first meeting, we had a transcriber there just to show that it was a new day, that we really needed to be as open and transparent as possible.
Chuck?
One of the things I think we were hoping might happen tonight would be that whether or not you, Senator, actually sort of say what are the 2 or 3 issues that you would like the support of the entire county apparatus on that would strengthen what you see as are the shortcomings of the current state law on flooding. And then sort of test that across it's lovely to see as much agreement as there is tonight, and that has to do with the fact that in 2 days, by a 6-to-1 vote, likely, the freeholders will pass something, and it's, as I understand it, right, if what has been said to the freeholders is true, the executive will sign it, and it will, in fact, establish both greater limitations on what contributions can be made, and as freeholders have said, also provide tougher penalties.
You know, I'm sorry.
But my question is, on some of the other issues, I mean, one of the questions is there a way that the state could actually cut down on wheeling by a broader definition of what it is that constitutes a contribution by, for example, a PAC? Is that something that this group would agree about? And is it something you need? Well, I think what we'd love to have discussed is what you think you need. You've already told us, elect, and I think from what I can tell, you've got agreement on that. But then in addition, you've got 241 different laws right now dealing in the state, trying to at the county and municipal level. I'm not quite clear whether or not you would like to see those go away, or in fact, and certainly you don't want them to go away before the law gets strengthened. But what would constitute an adequate sort of state law that would allow the counties and the municipalities to relax and know or can that really be done? I think that's what I think we'd like to have some convergence on that if we could tonight.
I think the basic is transparency and making sure that all of those numbered 501(c)(3)s or 4Cs, I can never keep all those numbers straight, that all of those accounts must divulge who their contributors are. And on the other side of that, just as recently, the bill that I sponsored that required that, my co-prime sponsor was then Senator Barbara Buono, who, having come through this gubernatorial campaign, remember things were slightly different when she was running than the environment today. She said she was almost backing off that idea because people were only giving some money to her if they could be assured that their names were going to be confidential.
Right.
Because they were
under $300, yeah.
That it would affect any state business that they had. I only bring that up. I don't think we can actually construct state laws with that idea, but I'm just mentioning that was a fact of life for her in that campaign in terms of raising money. So I put that out there just to think about it. But certainly transparency. I had a bill in, also I was never able to move, that said a treasurer can't be a treasurer for more than 2 accounts. We had cases in the old days in Bergen County. We had the same treasurer on about 10 or 12 different accounts. At one point, my own party, the Bergen Democrats, had a Jewish American, a Latino American, an African American, a laborers American, you name it. They had about 10 accounts, which were just ways to evade the spending limits by somebody being able to engage by contributing to all those accounts or contributing to this account that gave to this one. somebody I know used to say you needed a Dramamine to follow the money. So whatever laws we pass, there always seem to be somebody or some group of people who found the loopholes. So I think one of the things is limiting that a treasurer can't be a treasurer for 8 or 9 or 7 different accounts, which happen more likely within a given organization rather than statewide. So there are a lot of details like that, but I believe we need a basic framework. The state law that covers maximum contributions, transparency at all levels. There is going to be, and I've heard about it, some move from people who think they want to do away with all contribution limits, but everything has to be done in the open within 2 days of giving a contribution. So I'd throw that out because I would be willing to bet that will be a topic of conversation. And
that will be
You
a
know,
disaster for the state of New Jersey. We've had disclosure, and you can see that the contractors have just funneled into the disclosure is good, but it's not the answer. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not going to.
It's still actually in effect in Bergen County now. The original disclosure that I did, maybe my second year on the Freeholder Board, you have to disclose. It's completely open, that part of it. We've now superimposed on it this additional requirement. I think the problem with going after the PACs is they're federally regulated as to what they have to disclose and what they don't have to disclose, and we have to find a way of bringing that into a context, and I think that that's going to require Congress to do something about it.
Yeah. Thank you. You've got a tension between, on one hand, you have a status quo in which contractors, people who do business or who profit from regulations or the government doing something, give a lot of money to people in politics, ostensibly to finance campaigns, and it's, I think, more than just a public perception. I think it's a realistic observation that the people who tend to give the most money, the interests, tend to have either the contracts or the laws or the regulations written in a way that benefits them. And on the other hand, we've got the Supreme Court ruling, Buckley versus Vallejo, and then Citizens United, which equates money with speech, which was 5-4, and we've got vigorous dissents, and there are legal issues. And yet, from the point of view of the general public, which is an informed and involved public from those people, it's clear what's going on here. So that bringing this all down to the level of our county, and what you folks are going to be doing this Wednesday, I think, is to pass an improved ordinance or law, whatever you call it, at that level, that's going to give us back some of what was taken away. Now, if I may try to channel Paul Eisenman at this point, lest I get struck by lightning, I think if he were here, he'd be saying, it's great, thanks a lot for what you're doing, but you took away a loaf and you're giving us back half a loaf. So the question that I have for you, and I'd like to hear Freeholder DeNicola and yourself address this first, is that what can we do, given what you're going to do on Wednesday, but what's the next step to try to restrict these problems as much as we can without bumping into constitutional issues? Like, how much closer to bumping into those are we willing to risk going? And be specific in terms of how you'd like to see the law improved, make it even better than it is now. Because I think that we should be leading the state, and we should be pushing it as far as we can.
Okay, and let me just add one other thought. We really need to rein in campaign expenses.
Yes.
If we weren't spending so much money on a campaign, none of us would have the need to raise money. It has gotten completely and utterly out of hand. So, I think those two things are connected too. But
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that is so important too. The cost of campaigns, the idea that in order to run you need to raise $3 million in a very short period of time puts a tremendous amount of pressure on candidates unless they are self-funded, which isn't a good thing either. And I'm not a real advocate of public funding for campaigns either. But I
am, but
think
that's another
there
story.
are things we can do, well, not wholly. There are things we can do. Interestingly, Anthony Curitan came to one of our freeholder meetings, and he was offering the idea of changing the way county government or the freeholders run in the county of Bergen. That-
Districts.
Right, districts or wards, and then a number of freeholders who would run at large, because Bergen is huge. We have 70 municipalities. It's a tremendous amount of geography to cover, in addition to all of the officials that you represent. And that would make campaigns more cost-effective. But I do think, getting back to your original question, that there are things we could do to make up for that half of loaf that I feel is still on the table.
So you'll be
too.
introducing some kind of modification in the next 6 months, say?
I would hope that I would have the support of my freeholder colleagues in that. Certainly what we're doing Wednesday is better than the way the law exists right now. But I do believe we should be the beacon in Bergen, and the law can be even that much stronger. And Heather can speak to it, because the Citizens Campaign, and I know this from working with you 7 years ago as the mayor, Citizens Campaign has ordinances, has templates that have withstood court challenges on the constitutional issue, time and time again. So we wouldn't be putting ourselves at risk as much as has been said. And I think that I'll let you take the part two to this. I think that is important to note as well. It's about being willing to change the culture. It's campaign contributions. It's like drugs. And Tracy can speak to this. We had two terrible tragedies in our town in a week's time. Two 21-year-old children who overdosed on heroin. And now we're going, like the actor, we're going to go after the dealers. We're going to find where the heroin came from. Well, arresting them isn't going to prevent the problem. The problem is changing the culture. And that's the only way that we're going to eliminate the drug issue. And it goes back to paying to play. Unless we eliminate that culture, it's not going to change. And that's why we need to be as strong as possible.
Oh, I was just going to say, the issue that there's anything left up in the courts when it comes to pay to play, that's not true. It's been upheld repeatedly because it's an anti-corruption measure. It's not campaign finance reform, which is the Buckley versus Vallejo, the Citizens United case. And Citizens United also emphasized that, the anti-corruption laws are the ones that will withhold any court scrutiny. So we got to keep on bringing back. We're not talking about public financing. We're not talking about general campaign finance. We're looking at, you have a $10 million contract. Are you giving that to your friend who gave you a $10,000 contribution, or are you giving it to the most qualified firm? And we got to bring it back home to that is the issue at hand that we're talking about.
So are you saying you reject the idea that right to free speech is a factor in this?
You have no right to a $10 million contract, do you? Is that a First Amendment right? You can give up to, if you're a lawyer who wants to give $10,000, you have every right to. But you do not have the right to the $10 million contract. And that is that's at the heart of the issue. We are not banning all lawyers from making political contributions. We are banning lawyers who want to get contracts from the county of Bergen County, or the city of Mahwah, or the city of Hackensack. And again, you have to bring it back, because this is not a global, we're banning all campaign contributions everywhere under the sun. I mean, we haven't even talked about labor unions, which is right now what's holding us up at the state level, is that there's this war that, we only can do a pay-to-play law if it includes labor unions, which labor unions don't even get professional service contracts.
That's not true.
Oh, do they in Bergen? Well, generally they don't at the state. When they look at the big unions.
Professional service contracts?
I have a teeny tiny question.
Yeah.
Okay. this, and I'm playing the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Okay. The New Jersey Turnpike was built with pay to play.
Mm-hmm.
Every road, every street, every sewer system was built with pay to play for hundreds of years. Is not true? As a matter of fact, in Rome they had pay to play, did they?
You probably did, but
They
you might have
did.
paid 5 times as more for it. You don't know. I mean, there
Well,
was a
What
case.
happened to Rome?
I mean, there was a contractor who admitted that they inflated the price of the contract to recoup their costs. I mean, so the pay to play very well may have paved the roads in Bergen County, but you might have paid 5 times as much for it. You don't know. I mean, that's the cost of corruption. It's a hidden tax. You don't know if someone would have done it for a much better rate. I mean, we had. You know, we're right now looking at insurance brokers are right now making a killing in the state, and they're unregulated. And we go in and force towns to do it on a competitive process. We're seeing towns reduce their broker fees by over $1 million. I mean, and we're getting a lot of resistance in towns. You know why? Because those brokers are the ones making the campaign contributions. They're not covered by pay-to-play laws. It's a sick cycle. But I want to go back to you're saying, what can we do next week?
Right.
It's going to the towns. It's going to the other counties. It's taking this battle and leveraging statewide reform. I would, to Chuck earlier of what our ideal state law would be, it's taking the state pay-to-play law, which limits contractors from making $300 donations, and expanding that to every level of government, and then having some sort of reasonable aggregate limit, saying, okay, if you're a firm, you can't give over $5,000 or $10,000 within this county, you know, and do it that way, and come up with some sort of system where there are understandable rules across the board. But I think it's a town-by-town fight right now, and talking to your legislators. But
So Heather,
don't
we're
get caught
happy.
up in the campaign finance argument, because for pay-to-play, that doesn't really work. And then the other component is the 501c4s. We actually were quoted in the Wall Street Journal. We know the Regional Governors Association took tons of money from Sandy contractors, and we think that's risking possibly violating the state pay-to-play law, because it says you cannot donate through any third party to circumvent the intent of the rules. And it's up to the treasurer to enforce that. If the treasurer could say, you know what, the timing looks really weird, you never gave before to this entity, now you are, we're going to revoke your contract. And the treasurer would have every right to do that. It's just empowering them to make that decision.
So Heather, we're happy with the changes that are going to be made. But if we could come up
I
with
don't know, there was the cure clause issue. I don't know if that got fixed.
we can come up with a
Since the
specific
copy.
critique and a proposal for another notch of improvement for the near-term future. Can we do that?
For the Bergen County?
Yes. For the
I read it a couple weeks
is there a
ago.
way
I don't know
to-
if it's changed. I know that there was the cure clause said basically you could fix it if you ever get caught, which I think is a huge loophole. So basically, everyone will violate it until they get caught and then cure it.
anybody want to address that?
Yes, first of all, you know, part of the challenge and one of the reasons why, Nicole touched on it earlier with all the different legal opinions that are out there regarding what is and what isn't. I mean, one of the biggest challenges we had with the law previously was the varying interpretations and, quite frankly, the lack of enforcement from the administration as far as that law was concerned. And that's one of the reasons, and it was because there was such confusion. And there was one opinion posted on our website, another one that it just was it was very convoluted.
We have a significant difference there. The opinion we posted on the website was an opinion that the prior Freeholder Council compelled the administration to put on, that the Freeholder Board supported. We've got to be crystal clear about that. We didn't put that up on our own.
But the point being is that there was confusion regarding the interpretation regarding the law, which is now clarified. And so there's two components that are necessary. There's clarity and enforcement. And, you know, one of the things that Senator Weinberg touched on is the need for ELAC to actually not only have computers that function, but also have some teeth to be able to back it up with as far as those concerns. And one of the other issues that was touched on is, you know, how expensive these things are to run. And yes, we all want our campaigns to be less expensive. But as long as money is equated with speech, and as long as we're having these interpretations come down from the courts on high, it is challenging. I understand the
Distinction.
the ordinance is being viewed under anti-corruption, but it makes it very hard to just take that out of the equation, that there is this speech component. And when, as the county administrator touched on, when you have folks who can drop in money, whether it's through a PAC or through wheeling, whatever it is, whether it's through a super PAC or otherwise, it becomes very challenging to have these this be as meaningful as it needs to be. And we do need clarification from Congress, and we do need clarification from our court, and we do need, hopefully, to have a strong state law that will back this all up so that we can maintain the integrity of our government. I think that the ordinance that we're putting forward is a great step. Will this continue to be a dialogue, an ongoing, one of the, what do they say about water always finding the holes?
That's right.
That's
least resistance.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right. Money flows.
And the challenge is we're going to need to continue to react and respond to where we see money permeating the process in ways that are untoward. And we're going to need to keep that up in a vigilant manner, because that's what our responsibility is as elected officials. And, I think one of the most tragic things that we saw with Bridgegate and other things as of late is that painting of public servants in a bad light. We're all here, all of us at this DS, because we care tremendously and are working very hard for the public with wonderful motives.
Some of you.
Well, yeah,
Most of you.
most
Not
of,
all.
not all. Every profession has its challenges. But this is one issue where we all need to be united to make sure that we're being diligent, because it's the perception of the general public that does not have faith in us because of this piece. And that's something that's unacceptable for me.
Can I ask you a question? Just because you brought up enforcement, and I think that's a really big component. Just as a resident of Teaneck, just as a taxpayer, sometimes I find myself being frustrated hearing terms like "we're leading the way," right? And because I constitute sometimes leading the way being we're taking something that was once a felony and now making it a misdemeanor, right? So we're leading the way, and it's still bad. I want to know two things. One, how we enforce these ordinances that are being passed and the laws that are coming down, because it seems that we can do things that are well-intentioned, but if we're not enforcing them, then it's all for naught. And then the other thing is, I want to know how you're benchmarking what a good ordinance is. We don't allow ourselves to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but if we know that we're in a system where there are systemic problems and water does find the path of least resistance, how do we know that this is a good ordinance and not just an ordinance that's taking a felony and turning it into a misdemeanor? So enforcement and then benchmarking.
Well, let's go to enforcement first. What we decided to do was to have ELEC do the enforcement, because they have the mechanism to do it, they have the ability to do it, and it's something that we just don't have. If there is a truly criminal act that takes place, the county prosecutor certainly has jurisdiction to do it, but our ordinance on the Freeholder Board, we think that giving it to ELEC is the wisest approach.
Are there examples?
We would disagree with that. That's not. I didn't realize you guys had done that to the ordinance.
I would disagree with that too, respectfully, Mr. Chairman, in that when it comes to enforcement, the only leverage we have, the only power we have as a freeholder board is that public contract. Only ELEC has the authority to fine. We can prevent that entity who didn't
Freeholder,
follow.
I wasn't suggesting that the Freeholder Board didn't have authority to withhold on the contract. That authority exists completely independent. But in terms of prosecuting an action, we've left that to ELEC.
I'm not certain that we could prosecute or that ELEC could prosecute based on our local ordinance. And that's part of the issue here, is you have to effectively use the leverage that you have at our level as county freeholders.
Excuse me, but I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, because you can see the audience is going to nod off.
If I could, this is the one issue that we have, and I've spoken to Heather earlier on this issue, with the curing of something. And it is the section that still remains in the ordinance that we will vote on Wednesday. And it says a business entity or a countywide candidate or office holder in Bergen County may cure a violation of this ordinance if within 30 days of the business entity notifies the Board of Chosen Freeholders in writing and seeks and receives reimbursement of the contribution from the relevant candidate or office holder within 60 days of that notification. So that if they are found to have contributed beyond the maximum, they ask for their money back.
Let me explain the intent behind that. Very often, especially if you're at a large law firm, you might go to a dinner where you go and you buy a ticket to that dinner. And someone else at the firm may go to a different dinner someplace down the road, and they may not ever, the two ends may not communicate.
Inadvertent violation.
Inadvertently, yeah, inadvertently. That it's not an intentional situation, and the intent behind that was to allow that mistake to have an opportunity to cure. If that's something we need to look at further, we'll look at that further.
Good.
But
the version I was given had 0 days. It just is unlimited time.
No, and that's
and the other thing with that is understand that if you violate this, you can be debarred for 4 years.
4 years.
It's a long time.
From bidding.
And that is the self-enforcement
Yes.
mechanism. I just want to get back to it. This is a self-enforcing law. The risk of losing your contract is huge. If anyone follows ELEC, and it could be 3 years before they levy a $100 fine on someone. But the risk of losing $1 million contract, businesses self-enforce. That's why you said law firms have cottage industry of advising clients on how to steer clear of breaking these laws. The state pay-to-play law, I think Star Ledger did a study, 80% of contractor cash was out of the system by the next year because it was self-enforced. And then the other check on that is competing contractors who, that's an easy way to disqualify someone you're going up against. And the media, unfortunately, there's not as strong of a media presence as there used to be, but, those are some of the other, other candidates.
And here's the thing. If the freeholders become aware of an overage and don't see anything being done about it, we have the ability to decline to approve the contract, and the executive has the ability to decline to offer the contract in the first place.
and it should be also
All right, we'll
beyond
leave that
just
audience.
the. Oh,
So,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
What if the contract is already completed? And because the way I understood, and I don't understand very well, that there is time. I mean, it used to be when the violation occurred, but then it's when the violation found out. So you already have a contract. Is there any remediation there, or does the contract just go on because it's a contract?
Been awarded.
What triggers the 60 days?
Discovery.
Oh, well, that's the loophole. That's the problem. That's what we were up against. So, yeah, the way our model ordinance has is 60 days after the contribution is reported by ELEC. So it's a firm time. So if you made a contribution in June, you have 60 days to cure it from the time you made the contribution. If it's discovery, then it could be years. And you're right. There is no cure.
They never go after anything that's awarded in that. The contract stands. I mean, no matter what the loophole is, once you have a contract, there's no way of getting back the money from the contract, so there's no incentive after the contract.
That's not really the way most of the county contracts are given, but with attorneys, they're given in stages. You don't get $1 million contract, you get a $10,000 contract, and when that runs down, you apply for more, get another $10,000, and I think that I speak for the Freeholder Board and the administration in saying that if there's a discovery of a violation of this that is intentional, and frankly, even if it's unintentional, that person is going to find, or firm, is going to find themselves without a contract.
Yeah, and what we also do, even on the construction contracts, those generally go over a lengthy period of time, significant period of time, and there are progress payments. And in the case of Birdsall, the county had contracts with Birdsall. And as soon as we heard about it, we immediately, had our attorneys look at it, and there was a period of time there where we ceased payments. The bankruptcy judge ultimately made us make the payments, but we did cease the payments when we became aware of the violations.
No, and the other thing too, though, and one of the areas where we've had some discussion has been just not only just enforcing the words of the ordinance, but also the spirit behind it. And that was one of the challenges with the old ordinance, was that we had an engineering company who was in violation of the words of the statute and the spirit of the statute, quite frankly. and evaded enforcement as far as that's concerned. And I think it was because of the confusion surrounding the law. So, I would encourage that spirit to be encapsulated in the decision making too, not just, oh, it's legal because it went through a PAC and that PAC was okay, as the county administrator opened with. It's beyond that. If you know that PAC is just being a funnel, then you shouldn't be awarding contracts to
But
individuals.
the problem with that is every PAC is a funnel.
Of course.
Let me just add another, I keep on adding these little subtexts. The big issue, anybody's followed the news lately, is all about redevelopment and redevelopers.
Yep.
And we have a redeveloper pay to play.
That's I'm sorry, Heather.
We have a redeveloper pay to play ordinance too.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
And that is, it's pervasive. Whether it's all over the Port Authority, certainly, and all over a lot of executive, municipal. So that's a particular area which needs regulation in terms of influence and campaign funds. So are you covering redevelopers?
We have a separate, because it's a separate, everything, it's a different contracting law. So redeveloper agreements, it's a different, it falls into the local housing and redevelopment law, but we have a local ordinance. It's been adopted in Hoboken, Jersey City, several municipalities with a lot of redevelopment, and it actually was done by...
Fort Lee?
Hey, if you want to present it, we have it. It was actually state law, too, because Corzine did it by executive order. So state redevelopers cannot make... He applied the state pay-to-play to redevelopers, but basically... And that one is zero tolerance, because it is so... It's just awful, and with redevelopment comes the power of eminent domain, and we don't feel there should be any developer getting the rights to people's property when eminent domain is at risk. When you can seize someone's home, no campaign contribution should be taken. So it's actually a zero tolerance policy, no limits. No campaign contributions.
Chuck.
As Councilman Pruitt, who probably ought to be identified as the other current public official who's, I'm sorry, we also have a Board of Education member here in Sarah Rappaport.
Board of Education members.
No,
No, she's
done.
just stepped down.
my term ended.
Oh, I didn't know that, Marco. Well, we have one former Board of Education.
and a very good one. But one of the things that I have been really noticing and then telling the council about is the fact that you folks do spend an enormous amount of time going contract by contract, looking at whether or not there are reasons to worry about what is actually being, how it was that that contractor got chosen, making sure there's not a pay-to-play piece behind it, and also trying to make sure that you're getting the validity you need of it. And you have pushed very hard as a group of freeholders recently to make sure that people aren't being given such large increments that you can't track whether or not they are beginning to get overages. That's something that, frankly, our council is completely not doing, and I think is a great example for what the freeholders have done. I want to come back. It seems to me that Senator Weinberg has said, yes, ELEC is a very important point of not only enforcement but also of transparency, fundamental, and it's not working. And so it would seem to me that if the chair of the freeholders, with the support of 4 or 5 of you, and the county executive, would make a strong statement to her about where Bergen County is on that in a bipartisan way, that would strengthen her hand dramatically to do that. Another question is, where are you on the question of what you've just heard Heather's talk about? It sounds like most of you agree that when it comes to anti-corruption stuff, the free speech doesn't count because no one has an inherent right to a contract. And so that isn't a different matter. Is that something that both the freeholders and the county executive would be willing to say when talking to what it is that the state law should do to begin to tighten up on some questions about non-disclosure related to 501c4.
Absolutely for the county executive.
So what I'm trying to work toward is there, it sounds to me like there's enormous potential for agreement. And what's fascinating here is if you actually got that agreement working, as you folks know pretty well, you have a hard time agreeing on a whole bunch of things right now. But it'd be wonderful if, in fact, on this set of issues, the executive and the freeholders could come together and give Senator Weinberg 2 or 3 fundamental pieces for an important pay-to-play law. And I'll just throw that out. And I could name some other things that I could think of. I'm interested to know whether or not that's to be possible.
I think that there's broad agreement among us that that's warranted. But I think that what Heather's point is that when you mix pay-to-play with petty corruption, you're confusing the enforcement. And we don't have any issue with backing it independently of pay-to-play. And I would go a step further and say that I think the executive and the freeholders, to the person, will look at our own method of enforcing to make certain that when it comes to our attention, that we retain the power to say no on a contract. And we've done that in occasion.
There are times that we've pulled things when the prior freeholder board pointed out 2 situations to us that were right there on disclosure forms, frankly, that we missed, and we immediately pulled it.
Well, I've watched you. I mean, I've been impressed with the amount of time you both spend on that.
Yeah, and there are things that the freeholders don't see that we pull or we go back to the contractors on too for failure to comply or based upon knowledge that we think we have or based upon something in the ELEC report that we go back. But we're human. We missed 1 or 2. We did, and there was 2 at least I can recall, David, that the freeholders said to us before we had a public discussion on it. What are we doing about this? And this is wrong, and there are disclosures in violation, and we pull them.
Exactly, because at some point it comes down to the honor system in filling out the disclosure document.
Well, in this particular case, though, freeholder, they actually disclosed
They disclosed it.
They disclosed it.
It wasn't picked up
it was disclosed on the form that I created
contract.
8 years ago.
Yeah, it was. It was disclosed. That's where I part company with Heather just slightly. Heather, there's got to be some kind of practical sense for that honest mistake. I mean, this.
What's the cure clause?
Yeah, this contractor though disclosed it, and yet it was a violation of the ordinance. We missed it in the executives. The freeholders caught it, and we pulled, awarding the contract. That person, that entity, shouldn't be debarred because they made the disclosure, and there was no contract award and all the rest of it.
They violated the law, so they shouldn't have been eligible for. If they violated the law, then
but
they're ineligible.
Everybody missed it. I've got one that drives me to distraction that I can't talk about publicly, other than to say that I know that there was a violation of public bidding laws. It was referred to the county prosecutor, and he declined not to prosecute.
Yeah. But the onus isn't on you; it's on the business. You.
But the business disclosed. They were supposed
then they don't get the contract. They should have seen
They
that
should
in the
not have
ordinance.
applied for it. But what Tracy says is true. Also, there was a substantial amount of confusion over it, and not looking to fix fault on it, but fix blame, but trying to fix the problem.
That's why I have prosecutorial discretion.
And in some ways, you also don't. I mean, not to sound like a parent here, but like you don't want to negatively reinforce positive behavior. You're having somebody who's disclosing and who's being honest with the process. You don't want to send them the message that it's better to lie. And so that's one of the challenges also that we face, and that's why we put the cure process in there, is because we do want to encourage honesty and transparency, and that's what it's all about. But we also want to punish those who are really violating.
Our model has the cure. It's when it gets triggered. It's when we have a cure, and ours is when it's published and made public information. If you just allow it any time we find out, then it's we'll wait to see if we get caught, then cure it. That's what you're rewarding that behavior, which we don't think you should. Earl Asphalt, the case that went to the New Jersey Supreme Court, they fell outside of the 30-day cure. They got it back, I think, within 2 months, but they still lost their contract, and they still lost their case. And that was actually one of the items that they contested was that cure clause, but it was upheld by the courts.
What is the cure clause?
So it's if someone, within 30 days, you find out, oops, we accidentally exceeded our limits or we violated the law, you have within 30 days to get your contribution back. And then you're not disqualified.
Not the contract. the contribution that you made.
So it's exactly as you guys said, like a scenario. Maybe you join a law firm and you'd already given a contribution before you joined the law firm, or inadvertent mistakes. You have 100 attorneys at a firm. Most of them now are pretty diligent about keeping records, but you never know. There are inadvertent mistakes, and we don't want to disqualify someone. But you have to have a tight window, or else people are going to abuse that power. Our original model was 30 days after the general election. So what everyone did was, contribute right before the election and then got it paid back. So we realized, oh wait, no, that's the wrong period of time. We have to tie it to when it becomes public information. Their ELEC, and it has to be when the ELEC is published, because ELEC is even slow on posting their information. So it was a trial. We learned it over time in practice, but I think we've seen that that's to us the best solution is tying it to the ELEC report.
Another thing that we've done in the county, too, that I think has really helped us, especially with saving money, is that more contracts than ever go out for public bid, even for professional services like engineering and other things. This is not the fair and open process that triggers the pay-to-play restrictions. This is going out for public bid where the governing body is obligated to choose the lowest responsible bidder on a project, and that doesn't trigger any pay-to-play limitations or restrictions outside of what already exists with ELEC. And that way you are comparing, as you would for your home, okay, what are the bids that you've gotten on this job that you need to get done, and except that we're obligated to take the lowest responsible one. And that most of the time it's good. Sometimes, there is that lowest bidder for whom there is a bad reputation, but no legal actions that you can apply that would prevent you from choosing them. But it does help. It really does.
Doesn't that tend to get into the low bid that starts multiplying after the bid's gotten because they need a little money for this?
Overruns. Yeah.
But that's restricted to
Sure, I have a
10%
contract.
of the contract.
Contractor right now in county government. I could tell you who plays that game. I'd like to debar that. I've had this conversation publicly with the freeholders. We'll agree. We'd like to debar that contractor from bidding on our contracts. Right now, the way state law exists, and I'm not throwing blame at Senator Weinberg. It's there. It's been there for a long, long time. Is that, yes, you have to. It needs to be fixed. That the county could also debar somebody, because I don't believe that it's lowest responsive and responsible, and I don't think that person who submits all those change orders and comes in with a low number is being responsible anymore. But we can't debar them.
10%.
10%.
So they
But
can't
that's very
go
often
all
the differential between the lowest and the next lowest
Yeah,
is less than that 10%.
the one that I'm talking about is on
a limit on the percentage on change orders.
Yes, there is.
Right.
There is. But the one I'm talking about was originally a $20 million contract. So you're talking about $2 million, which knocked out all the other really competitive bidders who would have done it maybe for 21, and this bidder ends up at 22. And there's a problem, too.
So they're either incompetent or they're playing some kind of game.
They're doing both.
Yeah.
They're doing both. This particular bidder is doing
That
both.
should be a reason
But
to
after a certain
eliminate them.
period of time, can't you say, hey, you've got history? And
Yes.
But you can under state law, you can't do it locally, right?
Can't do it locally
And
by the
that's-
county. Under state
even
law,
with your own records of
yeah.
Right.
And I have another county administrator.
Wait a minute. Ed,
Jason,
you're
come.
saying that you can't
Preclude them
control
from
them
getting the contract.
From getting it if they come in the
Division of
lowest.
Local Government Finance takes the position.
suppose
we
you
can't-
wrote into your specifications if the last three
No change orders?
contracts exceeded X in change orders.
We are told by the former head of Division of Local Government Services, Mark Pfeiffer, that we would be violating the local public bidding laws.
Until the
do
state
have
law
a-
gets changed.
Our pay-to-play law
It's a
does
different
still-
topic for Loretta. She's already got 2 more changes to make.
I was going to suggest
Giving her
actually,
more
So, you know,
we indicated to most of you that we were going to be trying to finish up by about 9:15. And why don't we take another 7 minutes? And Madam Moderator, why don't you use those 7 minutes in whatever way you think is most effective for us?
You know, my problem is that all of these issues are interrelated.
That's right.
The transparency, ELEC, the whole issue about the corruption that we have seen as Bridgegate unfolds, and it covers police, state government, local government. I mean, it's all the pieces are there. And how we get our arms around this in New Jersey is not going to be a simple 1, 2, 3, 4 issue, but it's, to me anyway, it's all about exposure and transparency. Because if it's out there, people tend to be a little bit more careful. And the Port Authority is a classic example. It's another whole bureaucracy that we have to figure out how to get our arms around, because nobody's in charge of them, including their own commissioners. Absolutely no one is in charge, because you need identical laws passed in 2 states, and with Senator Bob Gordon and my colleagues, Assemblywoman Huddle and Johnson, were trying to get into some legislation there. But this is a big, big issue. Bergen County should lead the way. I mean, it's something like what you just pointed out to me about the public bidding law that I was unaware of. I'd certainly
No, we will
like
be in touch
to,
with you. It's on our
to know more
list
about
if
it.
the snow ever stops falling.
There are very specific state laws on this, so-called inadvertent contributions. But none of this can be enforced if we don't start out with the base in ELEC. You're never going to find out.
So actually,
So
one of the
that's the
things that we
first
can
step.
do is to tell you how important it is that the ELEC computers be updated and current.
Right,
And
and
that's
I-
something I think that we
I
can
think
do
a
by
resolution
I can do
from
it by
the Board
resolution.
of Freeholders, which goes to the governor, the treasurer, and then to the Bergen County delegation. You've got 2 people who represent Bergen, who chair the budget committees, Paul Sarlo in the Senate from South Bergen, and Gary Scher, who's from Passaic but represents some Bergen County towns. He chairs the budget committee in the Assembly. So it should go to the budget chairs, the treasurer, the governor's office, and the rest of the delegation.
And probably the majority leader as well. I'd like to say that this has been a really quite extraordinary evening. I think there's some major convergence. The places where there's difference, I think, are not irreconcilable. I hope that you folks go ahead and convert this discussion into something where the freeholders and the county executive deliver to the senator and to the whole legislature what it is that needs to be done in order to make your own efforts more effective. And many of us are going to try to be with you on Wednesday to see you actually take the next step. And I'd like to ask those of us who have participated tonight to thank this panel for coming out on an extraordinary night. Thanks so much. I want to say one other thing. This idea that the NAACP head from Bergen County has of thinking about districts is actually a fascinating idea, and we're likely to try to figure out what the costs and benefits of that are.
Doesn't that pit one town against another, though?
Doesn't that what? I'm sorry?
Doesn't that pit one district against another?
No.
No, they would, what would happen?
All of that needs discussion, and we're not going to discuss it tonight, but it is something well worth, and the state committee is very fascinated by that idea. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming tonight. Thank you.
Good luck on Wednesday.
One thing is